Well, hello, my name is David Nelson. I'm the editor of the Kitsap Sun here in Bremerton. Um, I've been the editor at the end of this year. It'll be 14 years in this job. Previous to that, I worked for a couple of years as what's called the local news editor, which is managing the reporters at the Sun. And then before that, I was an editor and a reporter at a newspaper in northern Utah, north of Salt Lake City. Called the Herald Journal. I have a master's degree in journalism from Boston University, and I lived in Chicago before that and have an English degree from North Park University. And I am a native of the Northwest, growing up in Mount Vernon, and my parents still live up there. So that's something that my family does, is still visit the Skagit Valley. I live in Bremerton, actually just down the block from our host today with the league. Maureen is a neighbor of mine. And so I'm fairly close to our office down here in downtown Bremerton. The Sun is still located at the same site that we've been at for, I should have done the math, since 1946 is when this building was built, or when it was developed as the Sun, I guess. It was a doctor's clinic before that on the East End. Before the Sun was founded, of course, in 1935, just over on 4th Street, by a couple of guys in their 20s, and it still lasts today. So the next big anniversary, I guess we'll hit 90 here pretty soon, but then we're aiming at 100 in not too much longer. So we're certainly hoping to make it that long, and I'm pretty confident that we will. And that was kind of my prelude to talking about what's going on at the newspaper now. The big thing during my career as the editor for 14 years has been change, and that's not alone to us. That's everyone in our industry, and like a lot of social changes, of course, influence what we do and what limits we're placed under. So I say that, but then I go backwards right away, and I'd like to remind myself and readers that change isn't necessarily only happening in the last 14 years. There was a time where the Sun in the good old days wouldn't allow women to work in the newsroom. There was a time that they only allowed women to write features columns. They did not allow them to write news. There was a time where we created a paper by letterpress, which is using hot lead to make it, which was what we know now, an incredibly unenvironmental thing to do, both for what it left behind and also what it did to the health of the men who worked and set that hot lead every night. So all of those things changed, and they all needed to change. And so I use that to remind ourselves that we have to embrace this and not get hung up on what a newspaper used to be, or what we kind of, this conception we had that everything was just fine in the whatever era you thought was the glory days. The big thing over those past 14 years is the development of our digital strategy and building out the Sun's digital footprint. That's kind of been, I think that's kind of the story of my career, actually, and all of my colleagues here, is how we've adapted to that. The first website, I may be just off here, but it was right around 2000, maybe slightly before, when the Sun Link was created as the first newspaper website for us. Obviously, it wasn't all that popular. That was not a time when people were getting their news that way. Since I've been here, there's been several iterations of kitsapsun.com. And so people, when you think back to what it was, when I first started working here, there was a computer at one end of the newsroom, and it was a little tiny, almost everyone was on a Mac. And there was one little tiny PC desktop at one end of the, kind of in a corner. And that was the only computer in the room that could update kitsapsun.com. So everyone was working on, solely focused on getting that paper ready, getting it sent downstairs. And I still remember in my first couple of months, I went, why does only one person know how to do that? Because it was really one person's job. He was a part-time worker. He was like a night clerk, and it was his job to put the stories on the website. So totally foreign to how we would work today, when we believe, when anyone in here, if they need to, can publish a story online. Obviously, we always want editors to read it before it gets published, but that's just kind of some of the context, how far we've come to a place where today we have 12,000 subscribers, paying subscribers only for the website. And so 12,000 plus a print audience. We're still printing 6 days a week, and I'll comment on that in just a bit. That number, despite all of the struggles and the hardships and the declines, the fact that we can grow the digital audience that much puts it back, overall audience, to what it was when I started, if not a little more when you count all the people who don't pay. That 20,000 to 25,000 people visit the website each day. That's a lot bigger than what it was when I started for a print focused product. So we've really changed that, and part of that is us, and it's driven by business realities. It was driven by our company. We've had 2 iterations of owners during my time. Some of that's pushed down by above, but a lot of it is just, it responds to what's going on in society. That's how most people read their news now, and so we have to be cognizant of that if we're gonna survive to make that 100th birthday. The building itself, I'll just say, because it's kind of fun history, but it's also maybe reflects where we are. In October 2020, which is, I spoke to this group with Chevin West, and there were several groups during that fall when we were all stuck at home that I talked to about the Sun or about different issues of journalism or media. And what I was saying that fall was the building was on sale. Well, it's sold. Some developers who are building some other Bremerton downtown buildings. It's the same guys who have an apartment complex that they built. They're working on another one right now. They bought our building. We do not fill the space anymore. There's 9 of us that work here. Well, there's 9 journalists that work here and a handful of ad reps who, to tell you the truth, once they went home for the pandemic, they don't come back a lot. They prefer working from the road so they can visit clients. In any case, we didn't need all this space. It made sense to sell the building. It's something, again, that's an industry trend that newspapers do not want to be building owners, where historically they had been, because they had a press. We don't print our paper here. We hadn't for several years. It prints in Vancouver, Washington, and drives up here. And so we sold the building, but reached a really good deal with the developers. If it was important to them to keep us here as kind of the historic tenant, because a lot of people know this as the Sun building. It's just, was it today? It was just today. I spoke to a woman who lived in Port Orchard. Her delivery hasn't been consistent, so we talked about why that is. And she said her husband was in the building trades group that built this building. And I assume what she means is this end of the newsroom. It went through a lot of development in the 70s and 80s. So I think he did it. So there's a lot of people with a personal connection to us, whether they've worked here, been carriers, something like that. So it was nice that we got to sit here, renovate the newsroom. It looks new for the first time in decades. Lights, carpets, paint, all of that. I was able to clean my office. You can see behind me, I got nice white paint and was able to put some pictures on the wall. And these all have to do with the Sun. In fact, if you were a little closer, you can see what they are, but they're from different projects that we've had or covers. So that's some history and also some context, and also some of what's most important right now. But the thing that's important to always remember is the journalism is the part that's most important. Whether it's a printed newspaper, whether it's the advertisements you want, whatever it was, the journalism is what matters and what is not replicated by anyone else. There are other people who sell things online, who give you sales. There are other places where TV listings are found, other places where you can play Sudoku. There's no one else reporting on local news. And so we feel like that's really important. And something that is humbling in a way that I felt the last couple of years, especially as we made changes. We've reshuffled some of the puzzles. We don't have TV listings in the paper. There've been some changes like that. Lottery figures we took out a long time ago. We don't wait for late baseball scores. All of those sorts of things that for decades people were used to getting. It's very sobering when you talk to readers and to realize a lot of them weren't reading the news ever. And I don't like to say that. I would love to provide a paper that appeals to a wide swath because of all the different things we can put in there. And with all due respect to my colleague, Mary Earle, who's on this column, we do still want some features reporting, Mary. We do still like to give something different on Sundays. We're glad we can do that. But at the end of the day, if you read the Sun, you read it for the local news. That's just the media ecosystem we're in, because there's so much else that you can find other places. There's so much commentary. There's so much national information that I'm glad that people can get that. And I know some people aren't hooked into the news all day, online or TV. There are people who don't use computers. I know that. So there is still a place for a print newspaper who can share that. But the most important thing is the local coverage. And that's what really matters to the community too. We have, like I've mentioned, there's a staff of 9 newsroom employees. 2 of us are editors. 1 is a photographer. Everyone else is a reporter. So that's our size. You know, we could always, if we had more, we'd cover more things, but we try to make good selections about what we do cover. We try to make sure there's stories with not only impact on the community and allow this community to thrive, to address problems, to be healthy, to also feel good about itself. But we also want to be very mindful of what people want to read about. And we have tools now that we did not have in the print era either. So that's another big change, is we know what people like to read. We have a good sense of that, and we balance the 2 things of, are people going to be interested in this, with, is this something people need to know? Because there is an element of eating your vegetables here too. But it's trickier when you have fewer people. If you have an infinite staff, you can cover everything, no matter who reads what. But when we have limited resources, you got to be smart. And I think we are. I think there's definitely coverage. I had a few examples in mind, but I won't go too deep. But even, you know, letting people know that the Hammerhead crane is coming down in Bremerton, that's a big deal. There may or may not be anything the community can do about it, but you needed to know that. And the Navy was not going to just come out and say it. So Josh worked really hard on getting sources to confirm it, whether it was the city folks finally did, the Navy came around and did that. But it took a long time, and that's important, that someone was watching that and kind of digging at that story. There's other examples. I'm gonna pause. I'm not gonna go dive down that hole right now. Let's see, I've talked about a lot of those things. Okay, so you guys had some questions. One of them, you know, I just mentioned Josh's name, so I'll go right back to that. Josh Farley is our Bremerton reporter, and he also covers the Navy for us. He's been with the Sun just about as long as I have. He started like the summer before I did. So there's actually a cohort of us that are all about 15 years, which is really valuable. I don't think people realize how valuable that is, to be able to retain people who have institutional knowledge. We remember stories that happened. It's good context. So for gosh, at least 5 or 6 years now, he's been doing his story walk. Has anyone, I hope, not everyone needs to raise their hand, but I'm assuming some people have hopefully been on a story walk or been to the Bridging Bremerton event that he hosts. It's a wonderful thing. He calls it experiential journalism, which I think was completely made up by him. He was honored by our company earlier this year with a big award. Our company has more than 200 newspapers in it, and Josh was honored as it was called like an innovation award for this thing that he's developed and sustains. We were up in Paulsbo last Saturday, had 125 people that go on a historical walk, learning stories about Paulsbo. So this is a way traditionally, we've always written stories, shared them in a straightforward way. This is just one other way we're doing that now, and being able to see you face to face, to invite people out, to get them. One of his focuses now is just the health aspect of it. Let's take a walk together. Let's walk for a couple miles. I think it's a great place where his heart is as part of this. His Bridging Bremerton will be on July 2nd. So that's coming up. If you've never been before, I'd really encourage you to come. It starts at Evergreen Park in the morning. It does a loop of the two bridges. There are speakers along the way that are talking about the history of where you are. And it's just a lot of fun. It's a great community builder. And again, completely different than anything that would have been done when we were just printing a paper every day. So I really get excited about that. Someone asked a question, they said, well, why don't we see more of those? And the answer is not everyone is Josh Farley. He has a personality that is very drawn to that. And some of our other staff show up at those. Nathan has been good about going to them. Pei has gone to them before. And sometimes they'll take a chance to speak. I've done that before and spoken a little bit at some. But everyone is unique, and I really try to treat my staff that way, that they get to grow into the way that they can affect. And so his is very noticeable. That's why someone would ask that question. I completely understand that. Megan Reed likes to be behind the camera. She does not like to stand in front of a crowd, but she develops her Kitsap archives posts. I don't know if anyone is familiar with those, when she finds a sleeve of old photos, scans them in, and then makes a photo gallery, and you can go through. And it's this week in history is kind of the idea, and they're really fun and they're really valuable. And it's a glimpse of what this county has gone through. And so you would never think of me, you would never equate Megan's enthusiasm with Josh's because you don't see it, but it's there in her way. And so one of the things we really try to encourage is every reporter can do that in some way. Nathan Pilling, one of our other reporters, is getting into drone photography right now, and we've only used it a couple times for a printed photo that we need. But it's great to have someone who decided to take that on, and so. You know, it's been, I think, some development stories. He got up and took a photo so you could see here's the land and what explained what was going on. But I think of what if there's an emergency, and Nathan's talent could become really important in something like that, to be able to show what's going on if we could then share that. So anyway, so I hope that kind of illustrates, like, we have a lot of people they have different things, they have different skills, and we try to kind of diversify that, because that's good to have on your staff. And for a small newspaper, it's really, really valuable. Our opinion page is changing. I was just talking about this in my column last week, and like a lot of the changes we make, like the Saturday edition change, there's a combination of factors. One of them is cost, and I won't beat around the bush by that. Our company says we need to cut costs sometimes. I don't want them to ever cut reporters. That's always the cost I don't want them to touch. So you do save some money when you don't print one paper a week, and we just design it, and it's available as an e-edition. Taking an opinion page out, in my opinion, the cost is kind of negligible. That's not the driving factor here. But what is a factor is the nature of opinion news, or the opinion content. There was a day, I said I wasn't going to keep referring to the past, but I am here. There was a time when the opinions shaped you because you really weren't seeing very many others. So it was very important for the newspaper to give you these perspectives. I don't think that's true today. There's so much opinion and punditry out there. There's plenty if you want to do your research and find things that either comply with your beliefs and reinforce them, or if you are someone who wants to be challenged, there's certainly stuff to find there. I was feeling burned out of trying to pick those pieces. How I described it in my column is, it used to be simple because we just rolled out a liberal and a conservative every day, and there you go, there you go, there you go, and you were used to that. Where I obtain that content from has changed. It's not the same. It's not just there's a stable of things that I can pick from. Some of that is just how they've changed doing business because they're getting out of that model. And the other part is politics have changed. I would love for someone to tell me, explain to me what the Republican perspective is right now on these January 6th hearings. I don't think you can do that because there's some who are standing up and saying, this is what I saw, and there's others who want to kill those people. So it became very difficult for me to say, well, these are two sides of an issue anymore from a national perspective. And I didn't feel good about that. And so as we evolve and change, I never like to change dramatically. And so from going from 7 days a week, we were 6 days a week of opinion for a long time. We went from 7 days down to 3. And I feel that I can then focus on those 3 days, because what I really want that opinion page to be is local voices. I think that's a role we can actually play that's different than anyone else. I don't need to compete with national syndicated columnists who you'll find, if you want to, or they'll have passed around or whatever else. That's not to say a national issue will never be there. There will be times where a national issue is on that page, and I will try to be selective about it. This is worthwhile. This is something people really want to know. We'll still do that. But I want to put my time personally on working with letter writers so it's a good letter that we present to the community. There have been some great one. Like example in my column, I have loved the responses to the Hammerhead crane story. And it showed you that people do care about that, funny looking thing on the skyline, that people really valued it. And what is the city going to do? Because I don't know that the Navy necessarily will, but the city can still maybe memorialize something. And I hope they see that and realize there's care. So that's just one example. There's other issues that go back and forth, or there's other things that people taking the time to write a letter, in my opinion, means more than taking the time to make a social media post or whatever it would be. And I think that's valuable. And so I'd like to spend more time making our page reflect that. And in the couple of weeks we've been doing, I should have tallied this up, but it's been really good. Each opinion page of those 3, each time it's had multiple letters, quality ones. I'm not scraping the bottom of the barrel to get these, but I can be selective about them. And on most days, we've also had a local column to go with it, at least one, if not a couple. So it's different. And I've had a few people say, well, I really want one all day. And I say, that was great for a newspaper when they used to do it, but we're trying to figure out how to do this a little smarter. And with the resources we have, I only have so much time each day. There are new things introduced all the time. There were a couple other very quick questions that you guys had asked. One was about Larry Little's column. Larry was part of the kind of original cohort of community columnists. This is the editor before me who brought us several on. Rob Wutot was part of it. Pam DeSalmo was part of it, if you remember those names. The others, several of them have passed away, in fact, but Larry's still there, and so he continues to write for us. He's a volunteer at doing that. He's not a paid columnist. But him, as well as all of the others who write for us consistently now, I'm kind of in a period of evaluating that as I look at what those 3 pages should look like. So we'll see. There may be changes. And someone related to this, someone asked about the editorial board. I set it to the side when the pandemic hit, because the key part of the editorial board was, it was important because it was a group of real people who would meet face to face, who did not know each other initially, who were from different political backgrounds, different careers. And so the thing that made it valuable, we couldn't do anymore. And we could have Zoomed all the time, but I was exhausted by that. And I didn't feel good about interviewing people over Zoom, because one of the things the editorial board would do is interview candidates and then share that with readers. So the pandemic kind of set it all to the side, and I haven't thought through what a good way to bring it back would be. And if I do come up with something that I think is valuable, I will, but we're not there right now. Someone asked a question about the Bainbridge Review, which is not our newspaper, so that was why you couldn't locate it. We do publish the Bainbridge Islander newspaper, just slightly different. There is no website component to it. It's a print edition we do for Bainbridge Island, and it's distributed up there. Some of it is, a lot of it is Sun stories that are reprinted and circulated on the island. Someone asked a question, excuse me one second, about press releases. There is an address. You can always send things to me as well. I check my email all day long. David.nelson@kitsapsun.com. There's also a general email box for the newsroom, which is sunnews at kitsapsun.com. those are checked, but what's important to know is kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. We're focused on writing news stories. We don't have a place that just press releases are reprinted. That isn't a part of our paper right now. So if it's an idea for a story, it's good and it's welcomed. Sometimes big announcements we can do. We do have kind of a section where we can do. It's more aimed at businesses, promotions, announcements, and things. I know Marie has been good about sending me letters, and Ann Stroh-Snyder as well from the league, and I run them as letters to the editor when they announce forums and things like that, which I know is a big deal for the league, getting the word out. So I've started running those on the opinion page just as a letter, and that seems to work well, and it still gets it out there. And then the last question that we had on there, someone asked about legislative coverage, and legislative coverage is very tricky when you don't have a legislative correspondent. Part of that is the rhythm of the legislature, because what often happens is that a lot of bills get dropped at the beginning, and some of them are really noteworthy or attention grabbing. And you could write a story every day on what bills our legislators are filing. The problem is you hit that midpoint, there's a cutoff date, and half of them die. A lot of them go away, and then they proceed and they really focus on the budget and those sorts of things. So we tend to cover things topically, like Nathan, for instance, will write about the transportation budget because he's kind of our transportation focused reporter. Josh would write about a bill if it directly affected Bremerton. So we are not centralized in our legislative coverage. That is a dream of mine, to tell you the truth. Kim Rubenstein is the assistant editor in here, and she and I have tried to brainstorm what we would do if we were able to hire a new reporter and have someone cover Olympia. I think it would be great. It's something not only we need, but the state needs more of. It's kind of a sad thing, the lack of coverage in Olympia right now. The Associated Press just doesn't make up for what newspapers could do down there. They're very short-staffed as well. So, and the Olympian used to be really strong, but they've peeled back as well. It's just a place that needs more reporters, frankly. So we don't have one to send down there. We haven't for more than 20 years since the Sun has had someone down there. But it would be a priority if we can ever get to that point. Though they do a service that shows the votes, and we run that during the session. So we've had that in the past and plan to keep doing that. Though that's what I had for the questions that you had presented earlier, Maureen. But if someone wants to ask something, they sure can.
So one question that came up was, and you had talked about this some time ago about interns and about, so you have 2 interns.
Yeah. Thank you. I forgot about that one. We do. This summer, we have 2 students here. One is he went to UPS, and he's not from Indianola, but he's lived in Indianola for several years, so he's somewhat local. His girlfriend grew up here. So he's here, and then a young woman from Grinnell College in Iowa is with us. And then last summer, we also had a young woman from Cal Lutheran, and a young man from Northwestern. Oh, I am sorry, I have a frog in my throat. So the way it was a budget thing. We've always had an internship program. I think it's really important because we need to give back to our profession, and hiring is hard. So having more students who get good training and can move into jobs and apply for jobs is really important. When I list jobs now, I get far fewer resumes than I used to, and so we really need this. Not only in the sense of the Sun, but in the sense of the country. We need more kids who are interested in doing it. We do that through what's called the Kitsap Sun Journalism Fund, is how we're paying for this now, which is a nonprofit fund, a line item fund that I established with the Kitsap Community Foundation. It is separate from the Sun. It stands alone. any disbursement must be approved by their board of directors, or they have kind of a fund committee that can say yes, it's okay. It's very similar to if you had a philanthropic fund in your family's name that could then distribute money. So we have to be really straightforward. You can't just give the money back to the Sun. We have to say, this is how much was spent. This is exactly what was spent for. And so it can come around and be legal. But it's something we participated in the Kitsap Great Give. I've done other appeals at certain times, and people have given to, a lot of times, people who say, how can I help you? I already subscribe. How can we help more? And that's a way you can do that. It's not intended to raise a ton of money, but if we can raise about $5,000 covers having an intern here for the whole summer. And so that's kind of the goal that I set, and try to keep that going. So that we can bring these kids in. And it also, what I always tell people who either I'm trying to get them to give, or when they do give, not only are you helping this kid, I shouldn't say kid, this student, young adult, not only are helping them in their career, and then, perhaps we would hire someday. That's also the goal. I want to develop people that I could then hire and bring to the community, but also it enhances the coverage that you get. And so I think, we should be doing that anyway, but we're limited on time and people. One person brings X number of stories a week for 8 weeks. That's covers. They might cover the thing that you've really wanted covered. So that's why it's hopefully a virtuous cycle. There's a comment in the chat. Good question, Pat. I'm working on this one. I have in the library of this newsroom, there is, the first way that the Kitsap Regional Library does have a complete set of our microfilm archives. So that does exist for people who know specific dates and things like that. I've always wanted to make that easier. So we are now working with a company called Newsbank. And I have, in our office, we have a file cabinet with all of the same archives. The same microfilm archives are all sitting there. We have an agreement with Newsbank, and I have the cardboard boxes are sitting there. I just need to spend a day packing them. We are going to send this stuff to Newsbank, and they will digitize all of it. And so it will be an actual newspaper page, but with the capability to do search terms. It would crawl it, find what you're looking for, present those pages to you. It sounds really, really cool. There will be a fee. I think it's $8 or something. It wouldn't come with your Sun subscription, is my understanding. It's like an extra separate fee, but once you pay the $8, there you go. You can start doing all that research. I am really excited about it. I think it's going to be awesome. It's actually going to help us a ton in here, because there's so many times that we want to look back through and see what the pages look like, what that story was. Because our web archives, there's some gaps in there, and there's nothing older than the 90s anyway. So yeah, so it's coming. I'm working on it.
One question that I didn't put on the list, it's not really a question, but one of our members is always extremely positive, and so she always asks if you had a wish or something that would make the newspaper your ideal, or what you really would like to have it look like. What would that look like for you? Your best possible newspaper.
I mean, there's a bunch of things, but what I've always, we've done this kind of thought experiment here. It's kind of, if you were to say, if we were starting today, or if we were all to walk out of here today and start our own paper, what would it look like? What would it do? I think that's a good way to kind of ask that question. And that, that's very relevant to that opinion page thing. That's one of my thoughts there. If you were starting a newspaper today, would you have one page that does this? And I don't know, maybe you would. If I had a wish, it would be for 5 more reporters or something. I've always said, what would be the magic number? Because the magic number where we could cover some of the things that we're missing right now. I think if we had 3 more, I think we would do remarkable things. It's that slight of something. We're not aiming to be the New York Times in Kitsap County, but if we had a couple more people, there's just enough stories that I know they're important. There are a few city halls that if we could only watch them a little bit more closely, if we could attend every one of those meetings rather than just checking an agenda for what's going to come on. Like we're very close to what I feel would be very solid just on the news side, and then you could talk about sports and maybe some of those other things. I'd love to bring more arts back into the paper. That's one thing that we kind of miss right now, and that was a budget question during the pandemic. So there are a few things like that I would love to do, and if I had a handful of people, we could knock it out. Robin keeps raising her hand, so she needs to ask.
Well, you say this, and it dawns on me that in the league we try to go to these meetings. It makes me wonder, could we have some sort of a little partnership where, a league member that goes and observes, and they observe just to write down what happens, without partiality, hopefully, and we make a report. Maybe that could be something that could help the Sun or in some way, but. I was at a meeting yesterday of one of the other units, and one of the women asked, and I said, okay, I will ask David this question. Would the people from the Sun, you or your other writers, be interested ever in hosting, say, small group chats? It could be either in person or via Zoom to talk local news and what's going on in the county.
You mean like an
in-person sort of a...
Yeah, I mean, definitely that's kind of
what Josh does.
A little bit of the idea of what Josh
does.
Yeah, I mean, his are very focused on things, but the whole idea is what you just described, being face to face with people, getting to hear them, because we're not at all of the opinion we know everything. We survive. The lifeblood is people calling and telling us things. So whether that was an organized thing where, hey, let's have some coffee, that's something has definitely been done. I've seen that in other newspapers where they say, a reporter will say, hey, I'm spending my Tuesday at the Silverdale Starbucks, would love to see you come by, and we'll just sit there and you can work. I mean, you can work from anywhere now.
Right.
But in a way that's saying, I am accessible, I'd love to see you. That's something that I think is definitely a good idea. Whether that's planned or it's just kind of, hey, I know that person is there, or I see them and like them or something. And the other part of your question, if you guys are watching meetings and notice something interesting or something came up, just let us know. Doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. I actually, that just happened today. On the opinion page, we've had this issue on the North Kitsap trails at the Heritage Park up there, which we had done a story that kicked it all off about some trail planning and some road on the Sound Olympics.
And actually following it.
Yeah, suddenly these groups are coming out from different angles. It was very interesting that I didn't realize it was that big of a pitch thing. We reported this trail was coming. Well, they had a meeting on Tuesday, and Linda this morning, who was at that, wrote me and she said, hey, that thing turned into a shouting fest last night. No one will listen to anyone. You guys, maybe we can help clarify this a little bit and get get a story or an opinion. We're going to work on, but it was great. I mean, we didn't know that, and we knew there was going to be a meeting. Nathan had planned to follow up, but he couldn't make it. So it was awesome for her just to think, oh, I need to tell them. And so we always read agendas. I think there are some reporters who will sit and listen. I think the commissioners, usually someone is listening to that meeting. Zoom has actually really helped us, I have to say. I've been thinking about writing a column on that I hope these public entities continue recording and broadcasting their meetings. I think it's a great thing. I know there's some people slamming the fist saying, we got to do everything in person now, but from our perspective, to know, I can tell a reporter, you don't have to drive to Bainbridge Island. You can just tune in and do your job. It's really helpful.
Yeah,
well, that's why this meeting is so great, because it couldn't happen if we weren't doing this electronically. It's the people at this meeting are from South Kitsap all the way to Bainbridge Island. So, and if we were down at the United Way in Bremerton, it wouldn't, no, we wouldn't have the audience, and the people here are going to go talk about what you have told us and share it. So it's essential that we continue. So this is awesome.
Yeah, I think it's a good development.
Yeah.
The pandemic had some things that we learned.
Absolutely. Well, we had to scramble, but we have experience now. So are there any other questions? Well, David, this has been awesome. You're always so gracious and helpful. So we very much appreciate your being here.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you. You know, we've always liked working with you guys, and like that you support us and understand what's needed, understand why this is important. I think that's the biggest thing. If you can just keep sharing that, because it does. I think it really does matter what we do.
Absolutely. So, okay. Well, thanks again, and we will we'll take you up on this getting together in the future and informally and just having conversations. So thank you for what you do for us. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
All right.
You're welcome. Talk to you later.
Stay well.
Bye-bye.